What's up everybody? Today we're going to be breaking down another recruiting graphic, and along the way I'm going to show you some techniques and some easy ways to make your graphic pop. Or as I say in the graphic design world, I'm going to show you the make it pop button. So in this graphic I started out with a gradient background. I just used this gradient tool, click and then drag down, and that made a gradient out this way, and then I just made a square and cut it out of the top of that gradient. So that's what it looks like without the layer mask, and then I just cut off a square up here. So this is the floor. Then I made the background, which is like the wall, and I did the same thing but basically going the opposite way. So now you have the floor and you have the background. Then I just used a white brush set to dissolve. So if you click on the brush and you go up here and you click dissolve, you can paint in little dots like this. So these are supposed to be stars, and this is just like the easy way to do it. As you can see, it's set to dissolve and then set on 5%. So if you want to get like a very little amount, you want to set it to a very low fill or opacity when you have it on dissolve. So then I have the theme of the graphic, which is make your mark, and here's where it starts to pop. So this just looks pretty boring. I mean, you could keep it as is, and like we could do some things to it later to make it look a little better. That right there makes the typography pop already. So all that is a gradient overlay set to color dodge, and then I just like move the opacity and the scale based on what I wanted it to look like. If I bumped it up any more, it would be like a little bit too teal, which is just not really in their color scheme. So I bumped it down enough to get almost there but not quite, and then we're just going to do that to everything. So I have a copy of that same text, I moved it up here, that's what this is, and then I just convert it to a shape. So you can right click on it, convert to shape, and then once I converted it to a shape, you can click on the square down here and you can just like make it a stroke, which is what I did here. So it's set to blue, set to 1, and then just a regular stroke. Then I put a gradient overlay on that, and I did the same thing below. So as you can see, that's normal, that's with the overlay, and it looks pretty poppin' to me. So I did the same thing with this bolt. So I put a bolt up in the top left, which is like the Air Force logo, and then added in 2 gradient overlays, and there it is. It just like makes it pop. Again over here, 2 gradient overlays. It's kind of hidden, but still, it just looks better when it has the overlays on it. So then I have in these 4 bolts on the bottom, and again, they look pretty boring. If you add in a gradient overlay, look at that. It's like a glowy, cool effect. All that is a color or a gradient overlay set to radial. So this one's set to radial, so it starts right here and just like spans outward. Whereas these are linear, so they go from like top to bottom or like left to right. That's all I did there. Then I added in clouds, give him a drop shadow, added in more drop shadows for his feet, which are just black brushes. That's the player. Then I gave him an inner shadow just to make him blend in with the background more so he's not so harsh. I added in this yellow bolt and just put a camera raw filter on it to make it a little more crispy, and then just tweaked it with the hue saturation to make it blue. So I just moved the slider this way and then cranked up the saturation. Then I put the bolt in a group. I gave it an inner shadow and a drop shadow. The inner shadow is a white color dodge shadow set to 55%, so it just gives it some glow on the inside of it, making it go from that to that. And the drop shadow is an outer glow, so it's a blue set to overlay that's just pretty soft, so it just kind of glows on the player. And then I took that same blue, I just created a color fill and I painted it in, so that's what it looks like everywhere. I just click Control I to invert that, and then I just painted it in where I wanted it. So I just softly brushed it in over the arrow just to make it look like it's glowing, and then some right here. Set that to 75%, and that's on screen. When it's normal, obviously that's what it looks like. I set to screen and brushed it in. Then I used this hue saturation layer to change his skin color to black and white. And then I added in these lens flares, which is just another way to make it pop. and the top one is set to, so these lens flares are like two different lens flares on top of each other. So the top one is set to linear dodge add, and the bottom one is set to normal. And the top one is the color of the lens flare. So like it's basically all white, but the top one is actually a blue lens flare on top of the white lens flare, and together they make that look. Then I added in another cloud, and then I did the Control Shift Alt E to make a stamped layer, and then went up here to image and then clicked apply image, and that created this. So I made it into a smart object and just brushed it in like around him, set it to 75%, and then I made a duplicate and set it to screen, and then put a blur on it and just brush that in where I wanted it, basically just over the arrow mostly, and then a couple other areas. And then I added in the cloud on top of it, and first name, last name, and then I just threw in a curves layer to make it a little more contrasty, and two different color lookups. So if you haven't checked out my Patreon, go check that out. There are a couple PSDs on my Patreon that are accessible to anyone, and there are some that you'll have to subscribe to the Patreon to get access to learn from those as well. So go check that out. I'll be trying to update that every month, probably in the first 5 days of the month, to give some consistency but also some leniency. And thanks to everyone who has supported me already. I appreciate you guys supporting all this. I hope it's helpful to you guys. Feel free to reach out to me on social media and stuff if you have questions, and I'll try to be as helpful as I can. Thanks again for all the support.